top 3 wokest science institutions. Science institutions should stick to science, stick to data, logic, evidence, dry, unemotional, no bias, no groupthink, no ideology. Well, we're going to show the opposite of that. Now, to find the wokest, I've only actually looked at Australian science institutions. I'm going to extend this to other countries in the future episodes, so I can find America's wokest science institution and the British one, and then the world final. So if you're not from Australia, please comment below where I should look in your country. Give us some links and some evidence. But I guarantee you, Australia punches way above its weight in woke science institutions, just like we do in the Olympics, but not in a good way. All right, let's start with Australia's 3rd most woke science institution. And that award goes to the Australian Nuclear Science and Technology Organisation. Now, to give you some background, especially to non-Australians, we've gone through a bit of a crazy period recently with people prefacing just about every statement in public, even starting every meeting at work, with an acknowledgement of country. It's essentially trying to say that Australia isn't really a proper country, it's still owned by the Indigenous people, and that, well, we don't deserve to be here. I call it the Indigenous prayer. You can see it on the websites of every government department and in almost every major company. And it goes something like this. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of country. You don't say the country, say country. Throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to elders past, present and usually future actually, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. They do this at the beginning of every meeting in large organisations, and people are actually supposed to keep a straight face too. But let's look at Australia's Nuclear Science Organisation. Look at their web pages. ANSTO's 2 main campuses are located on the traditional lands of the Aboriginal nations of Darawal at Lucas Heights and Carlin at Clayton. Furthermore, ANSTO's extensive collaboration with universities and industry partners naturally connect with other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander nations on a national scale. What they're sort of trying to say is that they feel dreadfully sorry that they've stolen the land off these people, but, well, suck it up actually, in their woke sort of way. Therefore, we recognise these peoples as Australia's first scientists, navigators, mathematicians and engineers. I mean, seriously, engineers and mathematicians. Their knowledge and skills are an integral part of the future of Australia and understanding its unique attributes. This is ANSTO, nuclear reactors and stuff. So what is the knowledge about nuclear science that they get from the Aboriginal people? Where did they build their nuclear reactors?
Stop being racist.
Now, because this is essentially a racist statement implying that Aboriginal people are somehow different to other people, for one, because they're the only ones who are acknowledged by ANSTO, you've got to ask why they don't acknowledge the race that was at the primary source of all nuclear knowledge. And it's not the Aboriginals, it's not even the Egyptians, and no, it's not the Europeans. It's the New Zealanders. That great civilization. Ernest Rutherford discovered atomic nuclei, and he was a Kiwi. So I've written a new acknowledgement that ANSTO can use if they want. We acknowledge New Zealanders and pay our respects to Kiwis past, present and future, and kiss the arses of all Kiwis for their nuclear knowledge that they pass on genetically from generation to generation. And we apologise for the mistreatment of Kiwis by us Aussies, even though most of them seem to be living here at the moment. We apologise, you know, for all those jokes about sheep and things like that. And remember, while we're acknowledging this rubbish and in this crazy world, maybe remember that the algorithm is getting hungry and it needs a like and a subscribe. So let's move on to the number 2 wokest science institution in Australia. The the Department of Industry, Science and Resources. This is a federally government-funded organisation that sets priorities for government-funded research. We're talking in billions of dollars a year, and they just came out with their brand new research priorities. Now you're thinking things like science to support industry, make Australia's farms more efficient and profitable, maybe funding new ways to find minerals. After all, Australia is mostly a mining export country. That's where we get most of our cash from. But let's look at the latest set of government research priorities. Let's zip off to their website and scroll down a bit. Oh, look, acknowledgement of country. We'll ignore that conspicuous shallow tokenism and go on to the first priority, transitioning to a net zero future. Oh, what a surprise. What they actually means is that even if it kills the economy and makes no difference because of what the rest of the world will do, we're going to commit economic suicide anyway, no matter what. The next one is supporting healthy, thriving communities. Well, that means nothing and anything, typical modern speak, but as a guidance for science, utterly and completely useless. So let's move on to the number 3. We have elevating Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander knowledge systems. I mean, seriously, where did these Aboriginal knowledge systems actually get them? Surely scientific knowledge systems are what we should be concentrating on. It doesn't matter what race. Science is science. I wouldn't mind this sort of claptrap if we'd actually learnt from what the Aboriginal people have already taught us about things like managing the country in terms of fires, regular cool burns, which we just don't do anymore. But there was nothing intrinsically different about their knowledge, something especially Aboriginal. It was scientific as the stuff on their burning, in the sense that they experimented, they repeated, they learnt, and they documented, at least in a verbal sense. They documented what they did. But that wasn't an Aboriginal thing specifically. Now, it's about at this stage that people in my position try to speak against this woke mind virus, especially on the Indigenous stuff, feel they have to say something like, I've huge admiration for the Aboriginal people and what they did learning to live in some of the harshest parts of the world and to manage the scrub in which they live. But I'm not going to be forced into saying that, because it's so bloody obvious it does not even need to be said. Crikey, I don't even know anybody alive today who's tough enough or knowledgeable enough to do what they did. But as a priority, number 3 priority for Australia's research, sorry, this is just romantic mythology pretending to be science. And that brings us to the number 1 wokest science organisation, the Australian Academy of Technology, Science and Engineering, ATSE. They are the overarching academy for science in Australia, or so they reckon, with over 900 big dick engineers and scientists in their ranks. It's big kudos, apparently, to be asked to be one of their fellows. And of course, they have the normal Indigenous stuff in their Reconciliation Action Plan, which is how they try to assuage their guilt. Our vision for reconciliation is that all Australians recognise and value Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander custodianship as one of the oldest knowledge systems on the planet. Really, we all came out of Africa. My English ancestors, they derived their knowledge from Celts and Romans, even the French, and well before that, yep, they went all the way back to Kenya or somewhere, just like Aboriginal people. Anyway, carrying on, through respectful working with, listening and learning from the current traditional knowledge holders and practitioners of science, blah, blah, blah. It's just a prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son and the Holy Ghost, we feel that we've got to say this sort of thing. But that by itself is nowhere near enough to get the number 1 wokest position. What sets this above the others is the submission they made to the federal government inquiry into misinformation and disinformation. It was a joint submission with the Australian Academy of Sciences, and of course they want to clamp down on misinformation. They had a bit of a rant about disinformation in the Australian elections and how it was undermining trust in democracy, and that Twitter bots had boosted the vote for Donald Trump by 3.23%, like it can be that accurate, in the 2016 election, and that this was obviously a very bad thing. Seriously, we have ASTI, a science and technology organisation with Trump derangement syndrome, talking about election misinformation. Why on earth are they getting themselves into politics? But it's actually nice that they do, because they show their true spots. It shows they're not a proper science organisation at all. But there's more. So what sets this organisation clearly, number one, is what they said in the submission about science itself. So they said, climate denialism is just one example of how misinformation results in societal harm. Don't you hate the word they use, that word harm, for everything they don't like nowadays? Disinformation on health matters, blah, 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 and environmental matters such as material misrepresenting studies of coral bleaching on the Great Barrier Reef. They're talking about me there, actually. Are a barrier to good policy and a healthy society. So you're now not allowed to say that the Great Barrier Reef is hardly impacted by bleaching, or you should be banned on YouTube, which is probably going to happen sooner or later. The fact that I've been proven right by the record amounts of coral on the reef despite the supposedly devastating bleaching events, that is completely relevant. What you've got to realise here is that if this mob were in charge, they would have banned Albert Einstein. It was well known, a scientific consensus even in, say, 1914, that light went in straight lines and it wasn't bent by gravity. And then Einstein comes along and says, well, actually it is bent by gravity. Misinformation, I'm afraid. Or what about Albert Wegener, who reckoned that the Earth's crust is made of plates that move around? Well, that was misinformation up until the 1960s, and now it's not. Look, science needs argument to advance. In every argument, one side is wrong. Usually they're both a bit wrong, in fact. If it is illegal to be wrong, you can't have a scientific argument, and science will grind to a halt. They're actually suffocating science. ATSI is advocating essentially groupthink, and groupthink is the antithesis of science. They should be utterly ashamed of their submission. So, in my opinion, there is no better example of a more distrustful, disgraceful, unscientific, contemptible apology for a science organisation. And in my opinion, they are the wokest science institution, not just in Australia, in the world. Prove that I'm wrong by giving examples from other countries. I want links and details. Comments below.